Hello everybody. I'm sorry if you had joined our webinar session and it kicked us all out and it kept doing it, and I thought it was just a waste of time to continue. So I'm doing this myself. So I'll be talking to myself, and unfortunately I don't have the fabulous Liz with me or any of you fabulous people to ask questions. So if you want to ask questions, please either email us and I'll talk to them tomorrow, or join me tomorrow. I know it's Good Friday tomorrow, but if you join me tomorrow, I can answer those then. Okay, so let's get into it. Okay, so if you don't know who we are the HR Experts International. We have been operational for, about 16 years. We provide HR consulting services, and in particular we provide organisational change management, design, transformation, leadership training and development coaching, especially executive and leadership coaching and career coaching. And we do a bunch of stuff around team building and team leadership workshops. So that's who we are. Our mission is to help create 5,000 authentic, adaptive, agile leaders, because we believe that the future requires those type of leaders, and any other leaders will be left behind. And if we do that, then we should hopefully be able to also create 1,000 amazing workplaces. And so we've made a bit of a dent into that, but part of these masterclasses is to support that mission and to support you guys, particularly in this time of COVID-19. So whilst we're talking a little bit and using a little bit about COVID-19, these principles are the same principles you use for any type of change or any type of team leadership approach you want to take. So we constantly get outstanding results for our customers, and we believe that's a mix of business acumen, HR expertise, our leadership competence, behavioural and change competence, and our leadership coaching expertise. Unfortunately, you won't be able to see the fabulous Lizzie here today. Liz has over 20 years experience. I've been working with her a lot longer than that, and she's a fabulous coach and trainer. She's normally in the background, but today she's not able to make it onto this. And myself, I'm Vanessa Giannis. I'm the CEO of the HR Experts International. I have over 25 years experience in HR training, a master trainer and a master behavioural coach. So I've done about 20 years of leadership coaching, training and coaching. And I've also been a HR executive and director across the globe, so on a number of organisations across a number of industries. So I'm fairly well equipped, and I'm a change accredited professional with a master's degree. So I feel like I'm pretty well equipped to talk to change and leadership for that matter. I've led teams up to 150 people through some interesting crises, so I can tell you that. Okay, so on day one, if you haven't looked at the rest of the series, please do. On day one, because there is a rhythm going here, day one, we talked about managing your state, whether you're feeling stressed or anxious, and identifying that, and how to manage you and your state. Day two, we talked about setting yourself up and your team up for success. And in terms of particularly borrowing from the agile methodologies that we use in terms of our approach to culture and leadership and those sorts of components, we use agile informed methodologies. So we talked about cadence and rhythm in those in that session, and how to create structure for your team. Yesterday, we talked about working through change and how to identify where people are in the change curve. We also talked about how you could help work through that change curve. We'll do a little bit more on that today. And we also talked about the faces of fear, a little bit about DISC. So today we're talking about understanding how to really actively listen more deeply and hold space, and understanding how to develop deeper relationships with your team. And tomorrow, we're going to be talking about an introduction to solution focus coaching. Okay, so yesterday I left you with a couple of questions, which were, where are you on the change curve and where is your team on the change curve? It's really important to know that because as a leader, you need to be able to establish where you are. And as I said on day one, you need to manage your state and get yourself in the right space to be able to have a positive effect on your team, because there is a ripple effect. So what is your natural response to fear, and what is your team's natural response? Have you noticed what that might be? And we talked about a very brief overview of DISC, and where do you think you are on the DISC profile? Okay, so today we're going to talk about helping your team through change and holding space and support. So I have been an advocate of change leadership for many years, for at least 15. As I mentioned earlier, I've led hundreds and hundreds of change programs, from restructuring to mergers to acquisitions to culture change to reverse integrations to system implementations, working with ABW, digitalising organisations, so a whole host, moving offices, moving countries, all sorts of things that we've done, setting up in new countries. So there's a bunch of things that I've done that require a significant level of change leadership. And I think that that is only going to continue. And so our mission really is to help create amazing adaptive leaders who will really create amazing workplaces within the VUCA environment. So if you haven't heard that term before, VUCA, that means volatile or volatility, uncertain, complex, and ambiguity. So we have an environment, let's take COVID for instance, where it is volatile. It's changing. Like every time I turn on the TV, something's changing. Our laws are changing, or something's changing. It's uncertain. We have no idea where this is going. It's a novel disease, so we don't know what's happening with it. There is a lot of complexity, trying to keep billions of people inside and not operating the way they're used to operating. We've got complexity around business, around families, around schools. There's a major amount of complexity going on, and ambiguity. You know, we have a lot of unanswered questions. We don't know the answers. We're just making it up as we go. And as Liz says, we're putting down the tracks as the train's leaving the station. So, you know, we're just running ahead of the game. And if you're a great leader, you're running ahead of the game. If you're not well prepared, then you may be running behind the game. So, and many organisations, I expect, are behind the game, trying to scramble to get remote working going. So this masterclass is really about helping you with that. So what I didn't mention is a masterclass is about information, about giving you tips and tools, and so you can go away and work with those. If you need development, then that's part of our training programs and our coaching programs. So this is really about giving you the information and the tools. If you've got the skills and competence to go do, fabulous. If not, we'll talk more about our training programs and coaching programs a little bit later on. Now, this saying has been famous and still remains true, which is 70% of change initiatives fail. Now, what they mean by that is that the original objectives of any change program has a 70% failure rate. So they don't achieve what they set out to achieve. Now, that is a phenomenal failure rate. But as far as I can tell, it's pretty true. Very few organisations, despite having 40 years at least of change management models and how-tos and all the rest of it, where our problem lay is in developing adaptive leaders. And for me, that is always my issue when I go in to help organisations with change. And so that is why we've got this as part of our mission, is to really move and help people move into a new reality and a new world agenda. So John Kotter, if you don't know who John Kotter is, he's like the godfather of change management. So he's been around a very long time. He's a Harvard professor. And he wrote this some time ago, but it is still true today, that people who have been through difficult, painful, and not very successful change efforts often end up drawing both pessimistic and angry conclusions. And you see that with with people all the time if you go into new organisations. Often people are change fatigued. They're angry about having to deal with some more change when the other change hasn't even been implemented properly. And, you know, it's one thing after another, and people just get fed up. And that's mainly because change is not being led properly. So you can have a whole lot of change managers, you can run around and have a whole lot of stuff. You have a whole lot of models and a whole lot of forms and a whole lot of process. But if we haven't got our leaders able to be adaptive and have at least the basic fundamentals of change leadership, then that's why often leadership change fails, is because we don't lead people through the change. So what are some of the big mistakes leaders make? Well, according to Kotter, there's a few. I'll just share the ones that I know are definitely very common from what I see. Complacency, that goes from top to bottom. So often leaders think, oh, well, I've told them what the vision is. I told them we're doing something. Let's just get on. That is not the way to run a change leadership program. It is not a way to run change or lead change. You cannot be complacent when it comes to change. You must lead from the front. And that means you need to be having a lot of conversations and you need to be actually getting involved. You can't outsource it to a change manager. You can't outsource it to other people. They can do some of the work for you, but you have got to lead. And if you don't lead, then you end up with a 70% or plus failure rate. Uninspiring vision. I can't tell you the countless number of organisations that I consult with. When I go in and I ask people what the vision is, I'm always, this is the one thing I do straight away, and I'm always a little bit amused by it. Often people can't tell me cohesively and consistently what the vision is. So sometimes, you know, there's various different versions of vision because people aren't on the same page, or we've changed visions, or we've changed strategies and people are just confused. So having a vision is critical. Having an inspired vision is even more critical. And on day one, I asked you for home play, what vision do you want to have for the next 12 months? What is your vision for this next 12 months? And make it as inspiring as you can. And how to do that is to look back and say, what would I have liked to have achieved over this 12-month period? Given the COVID and everything else, our new ways of working, what would I like to achieve? Maybe you're saying to yourself, I want to be a better change leader. I need to get hold of this change stuff and actually develop myself. This has actually worked out pretty well. I'm loving it. And our team's loving it. And I need to influence the business to allow this to happen some more. I want to have a more flexible workforce, or whatever it is. So, you know, you might have some negatives, you might have some positives, but what you need to do as a leader is come up with the vision for where we're going to be in 12 months. And I say 12 months because this is really uncharted territory. I know we don't know exactly what will happen with COVID, but we can have a vision of how we want to be and what we want to do in this next 12 months. So we've done that with our team, and I strongly recommend you do that. Okay, under communication, I think I've said this every session. I have never, I don't think, been into a business where I've had to say, oh, please, you're communicating too much. It's too much. I don't think I've ever said that. What I tend to say is, could you do some more on this? Is there more about this? So forth. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't think you can over-communicate enough. Not solving roadblocks, as we talked about on day 2, we talked about cadence and rhythm. And one of the cadences is stand-up meetings in the mornings. And the third part of that is identifying roadblocks and how to solve those roadblocks. So failure to move roadblocks out of the way is the number one reason I think that a lot of change fails. And I see it time and time again that complacent leaders don't have a proper vision, they haven't communicated well, and they're not solving the roadblocks despite being told time and time again these things are an issue, they don't get resolved, particularly in very large businesses. It becomes very difficult to resolve roadblocks, and so therefore you get a version of the change that is not what you intended in the first place because you didn't actually solve the roadblocks. So be very careful about that. Failing to identify short-term gains. Again, being fixated on the long-term gain is fabulous, and we need that. But we also need to notice the little wins on the way. And that's really helps drive people to accept change and help them through change. So especially your team, what are the little wins that you're noticing? So maybe they were quite negative in their opinion to start off when you're starting to hear them say, oh, well, I wonder how we could do something about that, or, you know, they're trying to problem solve it or what have you. Noticing those things, recognizing those things and identifying those short little gains is critical in order to bring the team and create the momentum and the rhythm and the energy for change. And then finally, neglecting the people side of change is one of the things that most organisations and most change programs forget, and that goes with failing to work with resistance. So again, there's lots of stuff on resistance, but if you as a leader are not engaging directly, deeply with your team member and team members, then you're not working with resistance. You're just following processes and ticking boxes. And again, resistance is often a reason for failure, because people will resist. If you're pushing, they're going to push back. So resistance will push. So you need to know how to work with resistance effectively. And not all resistance is people being malicious. In fact, most of it is not, in my experience, and I've been doing this for a very long time. So yesterday we talked about the change curve, and today I've added to that. So you can see that there are more emotions in this curve. And you also can see that I have added a new model to it, which is the Bridges model. So the Bridges model is about understanding change as three modes: endings, exploration or neutral, and new beginnings. So each phase requires something different. So yesterday we talked about how to get through the change curve, and so now this is a layer on top of that. So we talked about people going into denial, anger, shock, and then coming into stress. So they what we don't want them to be is running around the bottom. So those little arrows going around and around in circles. People can go around and around and around and around and around for decades. So we want to make sure, you know, I've been into organisations where somebody said, oh, you know, blah, 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 you know, complained about something, and I was like, oh, wow, that's really, geez, that's not great. And I'd say, oh, when was that? No, oh, you know, it was about 8 years ago, but it's still the same. Is it? I don't know, is it? So then I go away and you know, just do a bit of investigation, and I find that actually they're stuck. They're stuck in this space. They haven't been able to move through. So as leaders, this is your biggest challenge, is getting people through the curve. So that's your job. That's your job, to lead them through. You can't drag them through. You can't push them through. You've got to lead them through. So we'll talk about that today. And the biggest thing you need to remember is not to assume where they are, not to assume what they need. It's to ask them. And we're going to talk a lot about that today and tomorrow, is how to do that. So in our first stage is about endings. And that is about things coming to an end. So for instance, at the moment, some businesses have come to an end temporarily and might be in hibernation. Other businesses have stopped work in workplaces. That is an ending of a normal way of being. So people will naturally go through this change curve to some degree or other. Now, it really depends on a whole host of factors, as I said yesterday, as to where they, how fast they get through the curve and where they might get stuck. So Let's start with endings then. So this is where change is signalled, and the old way of doing something is either stopped, going to stop, or has just literally been ripped away from us, like kind of COVID has done, has ripped away our social interactions and ripped away our workplaces and so forth. So therefore, we need to go through a letting go phase, and we can't let go until we know we're holding something tightly. So if I hold a pen and I'm holding it like this, then if I know I'm not holding it very tightly, so I can just let it go. Now, when we're in anger, anxiety, shock, fear, what we're doing is psychologically holding on for grim death. And then we can't let go because we're holding too tightly, but we don't know we're holding too tightly. We can't see. It's like having an invisible pen, like we can't see the pen in our hand. And so that's your job as a leader, is to uncover that. And we're going to talk about that today, to hold space and start to uncover those emotions. So people can go, oh, yeah, I'm holding that too tight. No, oh, yeah, actually, this pen, I don't need that anymore. I can let that go. So that's what we're trying to do with endings. We're trying to move them into the next phase, which is in order to move into exploration, you've got to accept and let go. You've got to let go of the old. So now we're moving into the exploration phase, or what is known as the transition phase. So reconciliation is about we've reconciled with the fact that the old way is not going to be the same right now. We might go back to that. Who knows? I think there'll be a lot of change that comes out of this move forward. But we're reconciling with the fact that we've had change and we just have to deal with it, and we're letting go of the past. And now we're moving all into reorientating ourselves, adapting, trying to think about exploring new ways of being. And in this stage, we can tend to go backwards and forwards. We have a tension between where we are and where we want to be, or where we are and where we were, or where we were and where we want to be. So there's a lot of tension going on. And so we need to make sure that people don't get stuck in that, because, as I said yesterday, it's a vicious downward spiral. So this is the danger zone for leaders. If your team gets stuck in here, it's a long journey home. So you want to make sure that you're identifying exactly where they are with them and help them through. So that's about you having deep observational skills, deep holding skills, and deep communication skills. I'm going to talk about that today and tomorrow. And so as they move through this reorientation, what we're actually doing is psychologically reorientating ourselves. We're psychologically creating new neural pathways to be able to understand and accept the change. So again, here is critical, is you can see at the bottom I've put, in the first stage it's all about communication. In this stage it's all about holding space and being supportive and gently nudging people through and leading them through this bottom end of the curve. Now, sometimes people have valid reasons for being there, and that's why we need to hold space and allow them to work through those emotions. And then eventually, hopefully, we come up to new beginnings, and that's where our new reality is. And then we start committing to a new reality. We start getting impatient. We just want it to happen. And we start having hope and energy and enthusiasm for a new way of being, and our productivity and our morale comes back up. Now, as you can see, when we dip down into the danger zone, morale and productivity take a dive. Now, again, that is why a lot of change fails, that most businesses and leaders leave people at the bottom and move on and pretend it's all good when it's not, and then they can't get the change they require because they haven't brought people with them. And I can't say that enough. You have to bring people with you. They have to follow. You have to be the leader, and you have to inspire them to come with you. Okay, hope that makes sense. Since I've got no feedback going on, I'll just have to hope that makes sense. Tomorrow, if you have any questions that didn't make sense, please do let me know. Okay, so why do folks resist change? Well, there's a whole host of reasons why people might resist change. And I want to talk a little bit again about just remembering that resisting change is not necessarily about malice, and in most cases it's not. So the best principle is to assume ignorance first, and then on evidence, if there's malice, then you do something about that. So assume ignorance first. Also assume people are doing the best they can with the knowledge, skills, and state that they're in. So some people might be still in fear, anxiety, and shock. And when you're in those scenarios, you cannot move forward. You have to deal with that. That's why you've got to hold space and allow people to deal with it. So as you do that, then people can move forward. Now you might be saying, well, I'm a leader, not a counsellor. Well, true. So this is about helping people through as a leader, not as a counsellor. So some people will need counselling as well, but your job is to help them through as a leader. So it does require some counselling skills, and it does require coaching skills. If you want to be a good leader, and in fact, if you want to be a great leader, you have to have superb coaching skills and superb counselling type skills, and they are questioning, empathy, listening, holding space, all those sorts of things that we'll teach you more about in our programs. So some people naturally, as we talked about yesterday, the S style naturally dislikes instant change or fast change. They dislike change pretty much full stop, but they prefer it if they can take their time to re-stabilize themselves. People could be acting out of fear, lack of control. That's a big one. People fear lack of control. That's why people might be feeling a lot of anxiety and stress at the moment, because they've lost control of the situation. COVID has taken over, and what you have to do is find things and ways that they can be in control. So they can control things. I think I talked about this the other day. I can control breathing. I can control my mind. I can control my thoughts when I pay attention. I can take a 10-minute walk. I can focus just on today. So when people are feeling out of control or feeling out of control, then focusing on what they can do is really important. Feeling uncertain, lacking confidence. Now, this is the big one that most people forget, that people put on a face, particularly to leaders and team members, because they don't want to look like they don't know what they're doing, or they don't understand what to do, or they're unclear. And so when that happens, we become, and particularly when we're uncertain, we start to lose confidence in our ability to do something in ourselves. And self-efficacy, lacking self-efficacy is the belief that we can do something. So for instance, you might have some people resisting home working at the moment and resisting video and all the new technologies. Well, that's because probably they have a fear, they feel out of control, it's all uncertain, and on top of it all, they have a lack of confidence and lack of self-efficacy. So you need to understand that and work out, where are they at? How confident are you about using Zoom? How confident are you about? So, you know, I'm here to help you learn and develop. So tell me, this is a safe space. Tell me how it is. There's no repercussions, and you should make sure there's none. But I need to know how confident you are on a scale of 0 to 10. 10 being super confident, 0 being I'm not really confident at all. Anyone below a 5 or above, anyone below a 7, you need to work with. Same with self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is the belief I can do it. So you might say, so what's your confidence in doing this? And they might say, well, it's about a 5, I think, at the moment. And tell me how you feel about that. What do you feel is your ability to do this? Do you think you have the ability, if you knew how to do it, and if I train you, do you feel like you have the ability to do it? And then 0 to 10 again. So confidence is about self, and efficacy is about our thoughts about our ability to do something. The change has sprung on them, so they're still in the top of the curve, denial or shock or what have you. And when you're in denial, shock, anxiety, stress, as I keep saying, anger, you can't move forward. You have to deal with those emotions, otherwise they trap the people in and they don't move forward. Hence they resist. Too much change going on, that is often a problem. They might be worried about losing the good elements of the past. And often when I'm doing change programs, new leaders always want to, kind of just chop, chop, let's get on with the new. And, some organisations have been around 15 years, 30 years. Some people have been doing the same thing for 60 years. And now you want to change it. Well, what happened to are you saying the last 60 years are crap? So what you want to do is honour the past. So you want to say, we did great in the past, but this new system, this new technology is going to help us automate and be able to do more value adding, or whatever it is that it's supposed to be doing for them. So we want to honour the past, and we'll talk about that in our programs. And we want to make sure that we do that well, so that people can let go of the past, so they can say, yeah, we honour this space, we've been there, and now we can let that go. We understand why we need to let that go, and we need to embrace a new reality so we can transition through. Change might mean more work. So often, which I'm always a little bit amused by, is when, big old systems go in, and then because people haven't dealt with roadblocks, and a bunch of bloody workarounds are required. And, and some people, fair play, are saying, well, hold on a minute, now I'm doing more work and more steps and more admin than I did previous. Well, yeah, that's pretty valid. So you want to have an answer for that. What are you actually going to do about that? As leaders, what is it you're going to do about that? Surely you're not going to hold on to a workaround forever. I have come across organisations that are still doing workarounds from 10 years ago. So you do need to make sure that you deal with that if you want to work people through the curve. May not actually be for the better. So redundancies may not be for the better, but for me, unless we're in a really deep recession, I always say to people that redundancy is almost always a new door to a new reality. And if you really embrace it, you'll be able to open up new opportunity. And I can't tell you how many people come back when I've done outplacement programs and coached them through redundancy into a new careers or new business or whatever it is. And they, you know what, I didn't really believe you when all that happened, because I thought, there's no way I'm going to be able to have a new opportunity or feel good about this, but actually I'm feeling great about this. And now I'm really actually grateful that, I was thinking about leaving anyway, and I've been procrastinating for 2 years about thinking about leaving. I just didn't bother doing it. And so then it was forced on me. So now I'm doing what I want to do. So, this can sometimes be the better, but sometimes there's not. So, so if it's not for the better, we need to actually accept, okay, this is not as good as it would be. We're all in the same boat, COVID. We're all in this together. We're all suffering to some degree. We're all struggling to some degree, but we're in it together, and we need to figure out our way through. Low levels of trust are very high resistance. If I don't trust you as a leader and trust that you're going to do something well, or even know what you're doing, then I'm going to resist. So you need to have a good level of trust. You also need to have strong leadership. You need to if you lack strong leadership, then everything becomes about blame. It becomes about finger pointing. It becomes about, I didn't know, what have you, a lot of politics, as opposed to, we made mistakes, we're rectifying those mistakes, we're moving forward. And having that learn forward culture, we'll talk about that more in our agile culture development, is about learning how to learn forward, so failing forward. Resentment is a big one, and change fatigue. As I say, too much change and people just end up resenting the whole thing. So as best you can, you need to manage change so that it is not all at once. COVID came upon us and there's nothing we can do about that. So sometimes we just have to deal. And at the moment, we're all just having to deal. And as leaders, it's our job to help others deal. So we've got to deal ourselves and help others deal. Otherwise, you shouldn't be a leader. If you don't want to help others deal, and others come through, then you shouldn't be calling yourself a leader and you shouldn't be in a leadership job. And that's okay. If you don't want to do it, it's okay. But be honest and do something about that. Don't set yourself up for failure, because your team will see straight through that. Team will see straight through that, and you're going to deal with a lot of resistance. So make sure you're in this. And we talked about this at the beginning, right at the beginning. That's why I asked you, why did you become a leader in the first place? So if this is sounding all too hard, it might be because you really didn't sign up for this, and that's okay. If you just decide, hey, this is too hard, I didn't sign up for this crap, I'm not in. Cool. Then call it and deal with it. And if you are in, then make sure you're all in. There is not this half pregnant, that no one's ever half pregnant. They're either pregnant or they're not pregnant. And so you need to make sure that you're either in or you're out. Don't do the whole sitting on the fence thing. That is the worst thing you can do from a change perspective. And of course, there might be actual personal risk. And so therefore the person may end up being worse off because of the change. And we need to recognize those things. So as I said yesterday, you might be scared to death right now, and your team might be scared to death, and that's why they're resisting. So the first thing is to remember the principles I talked about, which was assume ignorance before malice. People are doing the best they can in the circumstances and with the knowledge that they have. So I'm just checking to make sure I haven't missed anything. And one of the things about resistance is you need to bring it into the light. So often people are unconscious about their resistance. They don't know why they're resisting. They don't know what all these feelings are about. And that's why we're going to talk about holding space. So how do you determine whether someone's resisting? Well, they might literally be resisting. So they are doing things that literally are resisting the change. Their behaviour may be negative or pessimistic. That's a good chance that they're resisting change. They may start moaning a little bit or having a bit of a whinge about things, and you notice that that's not something that they would normally do. They display obvious signs of stress or anxiety, so you need to watch out for that. You also need to watch for the anger and frustration, because that is, as we talked about, part of the curve. So knowing where they are in the curve is really important. What I normally do with people is when I'm confident on it, so you need to be confident on it and need to really understand, we do go into that in more detail in the programs, is to talk it through with people and say, I went through this, I went through that, and kind of self-identify and talk about how it works and where you're at the moment and where you were, and ask them to, where do they think they are? And then really explore that, because often we trick ourselves into thinking we're here when we're here. So we really want to make sure we're exploring that well. Okay, so remembering principles is important. Identifying feelings of loss is also important, as is helping them think about ways to involve them in any way you can. So we talked in the cadence about how to involve people in the cadence and the rhythm, and empowering, and that comes down to the delegation we talked about. So you want to do all those things in order to help with resistance. Questioning is key, so becoming an expert questioner. Most people think they're absolutely fabulous at questioning and listening, and most leaders, I have to give the feedback to them that they are not. And so, for instance, you might ask leading questions or closed questions a lot, and that is not sophisticated questioning. Sophisticated questioning is a question funnel. We haven't got time to talk about that. We'll talk a little bit about it tomorrow, but that's what the training's for. Holding space, we are going to talk a little bit about today, because that is super critical. Active listening, again, I'm going to assume you have a level of active listening. However, what we do is keep it quite a deep level and help you understand really where you are at on your active listening. It actually is very, very difficult to active listen, because in order to do so, you have to be 100% present. What that means, nothing going on here. You've got 100% focus on the other person. You're listening and understanding behind what they're saying. That's a very difficult skill to hold. So even if you can do it, even I've been doing this for over 20 years, and sometimes after 15 minutes, I really struggle to hold the active listening. And so I might just shift for a minute and just say, okay, so I just want to recap where we're at and just focus back down into what I've heard and recap from there. So it can be quite difficult to do active listening. And so don't assume you can do it, because I thought for years as a HR person that I was, and then I realised that actually when I started doing coaching training, that I wasn't as fabulous as I thought I was. And some of my team in those days might have said so, but they didn't let me know. So I think they thought I was doing a good enough job listening, but doing a good enough job listening and really actively listening are two different things. So getting them involved, we talked about that. Being supportive, being empathizing, we'll talk about that. Compassion. Gently nudging, so we don't do this in holding space, we do this more when we come to the other side, which is the new beginning side. So you've got to hold space through the first and second part, and then as they start to let go and move forward and start seeing the future, then we can start into the little nudging through solution focused coaching. Finding the wins we talked about, and little baby steps. So again, it's about what can they do? So what's the one thing they can do today? So they're saying they're overwhelmed and they can't cope. Okay, what's the one thing you can do today? You can get up and have a shower. You can get up and go for a walk for 10 minutes. So what are the things you can do? So we really need to focus on that. I talked about a little bit about the neural pathways in, I think, video one. So go back and have a look at that. And we want to recognize people. We want to recognize that they're where they're at, validate that, and also recognize when they're moving forward and really appreciate the levels of effort and that they go through to do that. Okay, and of course, acknowledge. So I'm not going to talk about ADKAR in a great deal of detail. You may have heard of it before. I'm going to do a quick intro. We'd cover this off in a great lot of detail in our change leadership programs. But for now, I just want to give you a taste of ADKAR, which is a pro-sci human-centered approach to change leadership, change management. There are many others. So we blend this with agile and adaptive leadership and emotional intelligence, high emotional intelligence, human-centered leadership, heart-centered leadership, authentic leadership. So we bring all those concepts together and bring those into the training programs to really build your level of competence. So for ADKAR, I'm going to have to move myself down a little bit here. Move myself down here. Yeah. Okay, so A is about awareness. So when we talked about the endings, that's when we want to be bringing people to awareness that things are, ideally, we give them notice that things are going to change, that we need to change, and here's the reasons why we're changing. So at the moment, hopefully everyone understands why we're working from home and that sort of thing. So it's the reason for change. So again, communicate in many different ways, many different formats to help people understand this. Now, again, often when I go into organisations, I notice that leaders have done about 10 or 15% of what they need to do in this space. And so I really encourage you to really work with a change. If you've got a lot of change going on, work with a change coach or a leadership coach, executive coach will come on our programs, because you really need to get this right. This is fundamental. You get that wrong, and then almost all the other stuff that backs onto this is very difficult to achieve. As you can see, if you haven't got the awareness, then you're not going to get the desire. And as we talked about, the desire is on the other change of that curve. So you've got to communicate, support, and then people will come up the other side into the other areas. So this is where we deal with the resistance, we deal with helping support people, we hold space and we help them through. Knowledge. So I need to know about the change, but I also need to know what I am expected to do about the change and how I am expected to be. So I might have to have behavioural change, I might have process change, I might have policy change, I might have system changes. I might have the whole thing change on me, like working from home if I've never worked from home before. I can imagine for those people, this time must be deeply frustrating and scary for them, because if you haven't worked from home before, it takes a little bit of adjustment. And not only are they just working from home, they've got their partners at home, they've got their kids at home, you know, so it's pretty full on. So we need to respect that and empathise with people. Ability. So this is where I talk about the self-confidence and self-efficacy. Do I feel like I have the ability to perform at the level I need to? What do I need to perform at that level? So this is where sophisticated coaching comes in, where skill practice comes in, and allowing time to do that. And again, often change programs just don't allow enough time. It's like training, okay, go. And just expected to get on with it and run without much support. So you need to make sure that they have comfort around the ability to do the job. They're self-efficacious on that. And then reinforcement. So of course we want to reinforce change to make it stick. So that means we need to do a lot of motivation, a lot of recognition and reward, take action when we need to about corrective measures, but we also actions, but we also need to measure. So what are we actually expecting to happen, and where are we at on that? And what can we do to help that along? Now, when I say reward and recognition, I'm not really talking, you know, there might be prizes or something like that, but reward is about more internalized reward. What am I getting out of this new way of being or working? And recognition is, you know, that I've actually moved forward and I'm doing something positive. So you want to make sure that you're constantly doing that. All these things are generally overdone, even when people know ADKAR, even when they've got ADKAR trained professionals in the business, people still underdo this. So I can't say enough. There's never, I think, overdoing the positives for change leadership. Okay. Now, one of the other things, in order to do all this, which is I highlighted earlier, is trust. If you don't have trust, you're in a little bit of bother. So if you already had a disengaged team or a low trust environment and now you've moved to a virtual world, you're probably finding it as a leader very, very difficult to engage your team. So I feel for you. Please do come on our 3.5-week training to help you develop better skills and more skills around that. And that's what it's designed for, real-time upskilling fast for leaders that finding themselves, you know, in difficult circumstances at the minute. So ROSA is about the essential components of trust. So it starts with respect. That's respect for yourself, and that is the underpinning principle: respect for self, respect for others. It's about being open. So this is where we talk about authentic leadership and making sure that we are open with others, open with ourselves. We feel we're cooperative. We're telling as much truth as we can without, you know, scaring people to death. And we're not hiding parts. We're being as authentic as we can be. And along with respect comes reliability. Are we as reliable? Are we there? Are we solid for people? So again, do you say what you will do? Do you do what you say? And do you walk the talk? Walking the talk and doing what you say you're going to do are number one in creating trust. Straightforward is about straight talking. It's about not having agendas, not being political, not being passive aggressive. It's about being congruent and being straight up. And people know when you've got hidden agendas. I can't go through that at the moment, but there is a model I talk to about hidden agendas so you can understand that a bit more. And then acceptance. Acceptance is about accepting people where they are, who they are, what they are. So there's no, it's all about inclusion. There's no exclusion. It's all about being good with everybody and coming to a space of being good with everybody. And in order to do all that, you need a very strong level of reliability and a very strong empathizing approach. And all those things together are the components of trust. So hopefully that makes sense. And you can, I would ask you to think about, where are you in this? What are you doing around trust? Are you as straightforward as you could be? Are you as open and honest and authentic as you could be? Are you being vulnerable right now? Are you sharing the vulnerability while being reliable? So you can do both. You can be authentic and reliable and a leader. In our culture, unfortunately, vulnerability and weakness seem to be paired together, but it's actually the opposite. Vulnerability is strength and courage. Okay, so building rapport. So I'm going to go through a couple of really quick building rapport scenarios. So this is these are NLP techniques. There's a couple of rules around this. Rule number 1, it is not imitating, so be very careful. Rule number 2, do it for good, not evil. If you do it for evil, that's going to come back and slap you. So these techniques are to be done for good. So intention is important. So you're doing this as an intention to develop rapport and trust with your team members. And you can do this with anybody, but we're talking about team members. So pacing is about keeping pace with the person. So you might notice that I talk at a fairly quick pace. Now, some of the team members, like S's and C's, talk at a very slow pace, and sometimes quite a slow pace. And when I notice that, I slow down how I talk, so I can engage with them at a level that is right for them. So what you want to do is pace their speed, and you might want to pace their tone, but be careful. I've got some rules around that. And you might want to pace their volume if you're a loudspeaker like me and somebody's quite a soft speaker. And if they're quite a soft speaker, then you probably want to tone it down a little bit. And if they're a loudspeaker, you probably want to try and talk up a little bit. So pacing is not about doing exactly the same. It's not about imitating or mimicking. It's about noticing where the person is and coming into their space a little bit more, respecting where they are and coming in a little bit more. So again, if they're slower paced, just slowing down a little bit. If they're quieter, just lowering your voice a little bit. If they're doing the opposite, faster or louder, the same, up it a bit. What that does is, in our brains we have mirroring and a lot of neurology and neuroscience that goes on in terms of recognizing and being in the same space for others. So when we're pacing, we're indicating to somebody else that I get where you are, I get you, I know who you are, I know what you need from me. I'm coming to you, I'm pacing you, I'm not making you pace me. Now, one of the things that I teach call center people, for instance, is to be moderate when they answer the phone, because if they answer too fast or they answer too slow, then they're making the customer pace them. So I know I'm making you pace me, but you can also put this on hold, make some notes, what have you, if you're watching this back on replay. So you might be sitting going, well, why aren't you going slower for me? I would do, but it's a little bit more time consuming. So you can put it on hold, replay, come back and do what you want to do at your pace. So I'm trying to be moderate. I know I do have a tendency to go fast, especially when there's no one interacting with me. So I apologize if I'm going too fast for you. And then matching and mirroring. Now, matching and mirroring, this is why I said on day one that high touch communication is super important. because we need to see each other. We need to read faces. We need to read body language. And now, you can see that you can't see much of me, but our face, our tone, and our hands tell us most of what we need to know. So, again, if I'm doing this, I doubt you'd be thinking I'm super excited at the minute. Okay, so that's telling you something about my state. Again, if I'm trying not to look at you and I'm trying to avoid you and I'm not really looking at you and I'm really struggling and I might be doing this or something like that, I'm really nervous or anxious. So you can spot that. So that's why matching and mirroring is so important, and being visually available to people is so important, because we do this naturally. We do the matching and the mirroring and the pacing naturally. Where it becomes a little bit unnatural is when people are opposite to us. So that's why we need to consciously notice where people are and pace or match and mirror to them. And as leaders, that's your job to do that and to work that through. And same if you're a salesperson or a customer service person, anywhere where you're engaging with another, then it's your job to go to them, not necessarily the other way around. So you can see here at the bottom that the ladies at the bottom here are a little bit distant, but they're matching and mirroring each other. So they've both got bags on the side of them. They've both got their legs crossed. They've both got their hands on their legs. Now you can see one's got it on her knee and one's got it on. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. But again, and you can see the lady on the left is leaning in a bit. So she's leaning in to listen. So the other person on the other side is just leaning away a little bit. So, so what you want to do is make sure that you're bringing together, you're coming forward and you're engaging, and you do that with your body language. So again, when you're talking to people, look them in the eyes. I can't tell you how many people don't do that. Look in their faces, look in their eyes, and work that through. So again, matching and mirroring is not about doing the exact same thing, because if you're doing this and then all of a sudden I start going, you're going to go, what are you doing? That's not what it's about. It's an unconscious matching and mirroring. So I might be doing this and you might just go, yeah, got it. So that's what you want to be looking for. You want to be looking for movements and not doing the exact same thing, but indicating, I know how you operate. You use your hands a lot to speak. So if you don't use your hands a lot to speak, you don't have to. You just need slight movement every now and again. Okay. So I hope that makes sense. So it needs to be done ethically and it needs to be done properly for people to not feel like you're mimicking them or imitating them, but feel like you're actually in with them and communicating deeply with them. That's what it should feel like. Okay. Holding space. I'm not sure what the time is because I haven't got my thing on, but I'm hoping that I haven't gone too far over. Okay. So holding space. Holding space is all about trust. If I don't trust you, then I'm not going to sit and bare my soul to you. And holding space is about that. It's about witnessing and validating another. So it's not about changing or advising or anything like that. It is about being with another and allowing that other to express how they are. So it is a technique and it is a skill that you need to learn. So holding space allows somebody to download emotions. Now, you might be the type of person in particular styles that don't like emotion or don't like dealing with emotion. But in times of crisis and change, you really do have to learn how to do that. So you have to get over yourself, and you need to get over yourself, and beyond that, you need to learn the skills to do it for others. So it's about deep listening, deep emphasizing, deep compassion. It's about being truly 100% present. I haven't got time to talk about presence today. I might talk a little bit about that tomorrow We definitely cover it off in our sessions, our training sessions. So being present is about bringing your mind to focus on that other person solely. So you need to be comfortable with witnessing. A lot of people, as I just mentioned, don't like people crying or being upset. So you need to get comfortable with that if you're going to do this. And if you're not comfortable with these things, do not do it. It'll be a disaster. Find somebody else who might be able to hold space for them. But as a leader, you really should be able to hold some level of space for people. So you want to validate and accept. And I'll talk about a little bit more how to do that in a minute. You need to be non-judgmental. So you need to listen without judging or thinking, oh, you shouldn't be saying that, or you shouldn't be thinking that, or whatever. So you need to just accept where they are, and that's authentic for them, and that's true for them. And that's the way it is. And so knowing that, you can then come up with strategies a little bit later once they've moved through some of this to help them through. But that holding space is not the time to start coaching them and advising them and telling them what to do. It's about listening, empathizing, and allowing authentic expression. It's about you having humility. You're not the leader, you're the supporter in this scenario. And as best you can, you want to empower them to say what they need to say, to really uncover those emotions. You might use a couple of the models we've talked about to say, well, what about we look at some of the models, where do you think you might be, and how do you feel about that? So this is a being of service to another. Doesn't necessarily need to be your team members, but it should probably be. But you can do this for everybody. You can do it for your wife, your husband, your kids, anybody. But these are the kind of rules you need to have set up. So unless you have the skill set, I would be a little bit wary about trying to do this. Do it on something a little less anxiety or stress related for people, maybe on a little bit of a issue, so you can just get some practice on that. And now in our programs, we have action learning sets and buddying systems, and all working with the coach. So you actually do these skills and learn these skills hands-on. It's not just a theory like I'm talking here. We actually get in and start doing some of this and start practicing. So we build the muscle, we build our holding space muscle, we build our expertise, we build our skills and our competence. Okay, so holding space, I'll just go through this a little bit quickly for those of you who feel that they are able to hold space. Firstly, it's about attending, and that's about being present, as I say, watching your body language, making sure you've got open, caring body language, watching their body language and seeing where they're at, and then making some inference about how they're being. And also using minimal gestures, so nodding, okay. So those kind of minimal gestures, but keeping eye contact where you can. Encouraging, it's about how are you feeling? How do you feel about that? So they might say, oh, I'm feeling angry. And how do you feel about being angry? Because often under anger, there's other stuff. And what are you concerned about? What's worrying you? So I notice you've been a little bit edgy. And I was just wondering, what's worrying you? What's on your mind at the minute? What are you feeling? And then, or they might have said, look, I'm really upset at the moment. Okay, so tell me more about that. I'd like to hear more about that. What's causing you to be upset? So tell me more is your best saying that you can come up with. So if you don't know what to say, you don't know what to do, just go, tell me more about that. I'm interested, tell me more. And that will allow them to speak more. You want to seek to understand, not to do anything else. That's all you're doing, and you're withholding any judgment or advice. Then we're empathizing and showing compassion. So when they say things, you might say, well, that sounds really difficult, or that must be very difficult for you, or that must be sad for you, or I can understand why you're upset about that at the moment, or yes, I can see why you'd be anxious about that. So you want to recognise and empathise where they are. You also have to be really good with sitting in silence, because sometimes some people can take a very, very long time to open up. So again, that comfort around sitting in silence. So when you ask a question, allowing them to sit in silence. And then after a little while, you might say, so what's going through your head right now? What are you thinking about? What does that raise for you? Okay, so allowing silence is also important. Then you want to clarify when they're saying things. So you want to kind of say, well, can I just check what you're saying there? So what you mean X? Or can I just test that I understood what you've said there? Or could you give me an example of that? So you might be thinking, I'm not really sure where they're going with this. So can you just stop there for a second and give me an example of what you're talking about, so I can really understand where you're coming from. And then listening, of course, deep listening. And here's what true active listening is. It's be able to read the person, really be in deep rapport and presence with the person, really hear what they're saying and hear behind what they're saying. That is true active listening, when you can really hear behind what they're saying and hear the unconsciousness about what they're saying. Because when we're upset, we don't hear it ourselves. So often, somebody might say something and I say, could you just repeat that? And they go, I don't know what I just said. I don't know. So, well, you actually just said, how does that sound? Oh, wow. Did I just say that? Are you sure I just said that? Yeah. So, yeah, you did. So what do you think about that? What's coming up for you about that? So it's listening behind. You're listening for themes. You're listening for patterns, so that you can just encourage them to come out a little bit more. Okay. You're obviously also listening to pace them, but never pace somebody who's upset or angry. So if they're not too upset, you can pace them, but just pace their speed, nothing else. And in fact, you probably want to do the opposite. If they're upset and angry, you want to pace them back down to a calm voice, slow voice, breathing in between. So you can, once you're in rapport with people and they're very upset, you can bring them back to a little bit more calm. Reflecting, so you might want to paraphrase. Don't do that if you don't know how to do it well. It's a very particular skill. But you might say, well, it kind of sounds like you might be concerned about this. Is that kind of is that what you're concerned about? No. Oh, okay. So what's the actual concern there? Ideally, when you say it, you want the result to say, yeah, that is actually what I'm trying to get at here. That's what I'm trying to say. So you want to be careful that you're paraphrasing well if you're going to do it, because you want a yes response, not necessarily, no, that's not what I was talking about, because then that makes them feel like you're not listening and you're not understanding. And by paraphrasing incorrectly, by virtue you weren't. So make sure that if you're going to do that, it's a very high level skill, that you be careful about that. Alternatively, you can just summarize and you can say, so what you've said so far is, what do you think about that? How are you feeling about that? What's next? So I'm hoping that's helped you with holding space. Obviously there's a lot to this, and I can't cover it all in an hour and a half. So I'm hoping that gives you some tips for now. So as I've talked about this whole time, adaptive leadership is absolutely critical. I think it's a must-have competence. An adaptive leader with the adaptive levels of competence, I believe, are the leaders of the future, and not just the future, the leaders of now. And the vast majority of us haven't developed ourselves to this stage of leadership. So we really need to embrace it and learn it and develop it. And I've been doing this stuff for 20 years, and I would say I'm reasonably good at it, but I've still got areas that I need to focus on. And it's a never-ending journey for me, because I always want to be better. I always want to be more authentic, more vulnerable, more adaptive, more whatever I can be. And so it depends on your particular values around learning and wisdom as to how much you value that. But everybody should have a base level of adaptive leadership, if not an advanced level. If you're anything more than a team leader or want to be more than a team leader, then you really need advanced skills, in my opinion, because that's what I look for when I'm hiring executives, and that's what most people will start to look for. So it is a higher level of leadership, and it's probably the highest level of leadership we have at this time. And what it means is you're managing the tension between technical competence and highly emotional intelligence, and being able to really be vulnerable and courageous all at the same time. And being able to discern what's a technical challenge and what's an adaptive challenge. And sometimes that's really not as easy as it sounds. And sometimes we actually have to sit and work that through. You know, I've been in workshops where you need to really work that through for several hours to really work out, because there might be bits that are technical and bits that are adaptive. And so you've got to really pull it all apart and work out what's what. And I know you probably don't understand what that all means, but it'll become more clear in the workshops and programs. So they are equipped to have open, honest, trustworthy, high rapport, high courageous conversations. So they are equipped to deal with all kinds of emotional situations and situations that leaders find themselves in, particularly in change and crisis. And it's all about helping others, helping yourself work through change quickly, being agile, being adaptive to new environments in the VUCA environment. So they obviously have a very high level of soft skill and competence, and they're generally, what I've noticed, the best adaptive leaders are constantly learning, constantly doing these coaching programs and bettering themselves as they go along. They forge culture and build highly resilient teams and organisations. And they allow failure. So I said before, that failure to learn, that learning fast and learning forward. Experimenting as an adaptive leader is key, but doing it in a way that doesn't send the organisation into a whole host of experiments all at the same time. And I've seen that happen, and that creates a whole other level of chaos. So again, it's about just understanding these concepts, but understanding how and having the skill set to do them. So people pick up these concepts and go, oh yeah, I can do that, and then run off and create more chaos than what we started with. So we do want to be careful, make sure you have these competencies before you run off and do this stuff, okay? And for me, again, I talked about this before, what we want to help create are authentic, human-centered leaders who really have deep skill sets and soft skills around communication, influence, conflict resolution, adaptability, resilience, all those sorts of things that are, I think, critical for any leader today, and certainly for leaders of the future. Okay, so they're the points I wanted to make. I've talked about our programs. We're starting our 3-week, it's 3.5 week actually, intensive, Leading Through Change. So that is about what we're calling future-proofing your team, and that is the fundamentals of adaptive leadership. So that's the base level of adaptive leadership. Now, that is normally $1,695 as a group coaching program, and you're getting it for $169. So it's 90% off. You might be saying, well, it can't be that good if it's $169. I can assure you it's worth $1,695. And we're doing it at this price. A, as I said many times, because of our mission. B, we're passionate. And C, we want to do our bit to help with the economy. So we're in this, everybody's in it, we've all heard it, we're all in this together. And so this is our bit of contributing to the economy and helping leaders and business be able to function through this time and through future times of change. And that goes for our 8-week program, which is elevating your team from good to great. So that's more how to create really high-performing, high-engaged teams, highly resistant teams, resilient teams, not resistant teams. You don't want to learn how to do that. Well, you might, but you want to learn resilience more than resistance. And for those of you who are wanting to do our Becoming leadership program, again, that's a live group coaching program, and it's about developing that authentic, adaptive and agile leadership. And in order to do that, you really need to have done at least the 3.5 week intensive, because we don't cover that back off again. So ideally you need to do them in sequence, but you don't have to. It depends on your level of skill. And you might also decide you want to have individual leadership coaching. Often people request individual coaching as well as these forums, and then that enables you to do, get the best of both worlds. So it's up to you. We will be sharing more about these tomorrow, what's involved in them, and we're opening it up to take advantage of these prices over the next few days. If you want to talk to me or ask more questions right now about that, well, not this minute, but tomorrow, Friday, then you can do so. Or just email us if you're watching this later on. So your home play for today: how can you develop stronger communication within yourself? What parts of ADKAR do you need to focus on? How can you help your team members transition? So they're either in endings or they're transitioning, and some will be in new beginnings. But right now, how are you helping them transition to a new reality of COVID? What if we had this for another 3 or 6 months? What if this was a new way of being? So all those kind of questions, where are they at? And how can you hold space for a team member? So you might not feel like you can hold all that space, but what can you do in terms of attending, listening, empathizing, compassion, those sorts of things. So think about that and self-assess where you are. Okay, that is it. I hope this has been useful. I know I've been talking to myself the whole time. I hope I haven't gone too fast. And please, again, send through your questions, regardless of when you watch this. We're always open to answering your questions. If you send us an email, we'll come back to you or give you a buzz. Okay, have a great night. Have a great day. Thank you. See you soon.